right, let's get started. Is that loud enough, Ty?
I think so. So Barley's still talking.
I'm listening now. That's all.
Well, we've had quite a bit of activity in the past couple of weeks. We've had a leadership meeting. I will go ahead and try to work with Clay and get us some minutes out on what happened in leadership meeting. The biggies were we decided to raise the dues to $25 instead of 24. We're paying the church $1,000 a year now instead of the 800 that we were. And then that's Christian has a survey that the leaders need to provide some input for him so we can get that turned loose to have it out before we have our Christmas party. We don't really need it back that soon. We have, as usual, we have the first two competition themes decided. Oldies in January, which is an open oldies, and then a open less than 2-year-old images for February. I'll preempt Patrick a little bit and say, got a volunteer out of Josh last night at Josh Says Mean Things. He's going to teach a different type of light painting again, probably light paint Verlin's Porsche or one of my GTIs. We'll probably do it out here in the parking lot. We had a competition that APPA invited us to join. Several of us competed in that, and we did pretty doggone good. We had 3 of the top 5 images. Gary had the highest image in APPA. I had the highest image or the second highest image in APPA and NAPfS, non-member. Dennis had 2 or 3 images. Nick had several images. Gary had several images. I didn't think to bring a laptop. I've got them on my phone. I can show them to you. But it's a long login or I would bring them up on one of these phones. The other thing that came out of the competition was APPA asked us, NAPfS, to host a competition between the 2 organizations and with NAPfS rules. So we probably say again.
We have rules? We have rules?
Actually, we do have some rules that are actually written.
Oh, that's right. That's true.
A lot of them are
Yeah, we
taken
do.
from
You're right. Yeah.
PPA.
Yeah, that we do. Yeah, we do. We have the.
Well,
some
the
in
big
there.
thing we do different is the way we judge images. PPA, 3 judges that hopefully have never seen any of the images, certainly not local members, judge the images. And they have spent years of training and competition so that they give scores that are in a very narrow band. I think of the scores that were given that Sunday afternoon, an 89 was the highest score and a 76, 77 or 76 was the lowest score. And about midpoint break of all the entries, and there were 96 entries, were below 80. And in PPA competition, that 80 is a magic number. Clay, you're all wound up. What you got to say?
You finished? I didn't.
No. So I think we want to have a combined competition, TBD schedule. I'm going to suggest and send this out as kind of an update to our competition that we have 5 judges. So there's less of the writing for the judges. 2 from NAPfS, 2 from APPA, and maybe get a Georgetown Arts person to join us. I know Steve, I think he's associated with the Gesture Show, is both an artist and a photographer, so I thought he might be a good choice. Patrick?
Dave Maldos,
Look,
asked him if we can come and be a fifth judge.
okay. We'll work all the details, and I think since we're into Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's going to be email sent to the whole group, to all the competing members. Okay, Clay.
Thank you, Bill. I am the membership secretary, and I just wanted to reach out and let you all know that, of course, you can join anytime through the website that we have, napfs.org. And I'm pleased to report to you that we had 2 new members. We had Tammy Allen last month, and we had Melissa Hargrave join this month. And we've had several renewals. That's always a great sign that you appreciate the club and that you get something out of it. There's Eric Reeder and Jonathan Rocher were 2 that I remembered, and we just want you to come to the meetings, please. And of course, you can always watch on the YouTube for the recordings that Ed Pete does. But thank you very much, Bill.
Okay, so the deadline for the Jester Show for submissions was Saturday. And almost everyone here missed it. Yeah, it's still open, but you were supposed to have it done by then so that we could be deciding on which ones make it in. So if you've got images, get them in quickly, or you'll be at the back of the bus. Okay, so submit your images if you want to be in the Jester Show. We have plenty of room. We have about 30 images so far submitted, and there's room for about 60 or so at the Jester Show, unless you've got like some really large prints somewhere. So get those, and also be looking ahead to the library show, because that date is also closer than it looks on the calendar.
What's the date on the library chat?
I don't know off the top of my head.
May 15th, June 16th.
Maybe. Okay.
Along with the membership discussion, Clay mentioned, our treasury is not overflowing. And it's really filled by members providing their $25 a year for membership. So I think we need to put a little effort into recruiting members. There is a Georgetown, Texas photo walk or photo event in March coming up. I'm pretty sure we can have a booth up there. And we'll need volunteers to do that. The other thing that I will try to do is get Precision Camera to set up a table for us when they have their twice a year event for reduced prices, and they have all of the vendors in. So we'll be looking for volunteers for that. I know Austin took advantage of Precision's event, and I think Verlin, you were there.
I was there.
So that's another worthwhile opportunity to hear speakers and also take a look at all the equipment. Patrick, you want to introduce Carol?
You don't have to.
Caught him with his teeth in his mouth.
This is Carol.
Hi there. It's been a long day, long week. Hopefully it'll be over. Oh, well, hi, everybody. Our speaker this evening is Carol Schiraldi. Carol has been doing photography for like 100 years. Okay. 60,
35.
35. 20. Okay. She started last year. No, she's been doing it for
What time
some
is it?
time, and yeah, but wait, let me check a lot.
It's like 20 years old.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, and in doing so, she has gone from taking pictures and just being like most of us, starting off with an idea and then working into becoming, I'll even venture to say, an artiste. How's that? Yeah, because she's doing stuff that we don't ever think of doing. And she's actually putting it out there for people to look at and actually buy. So, let's see, last I heard you were represented in how many countries in Europe? 14, 15?
I don't know.
So she lost count. There's so many. So,
I have 2 shows coming up.
oh,
I'm going to be in Praxis Gallery in Minneapolis and in Summer House Gallery, which is online,
okay.
and starting like December. So
Well,
next 2 shows.
so Carol is going to talk to us this evening. I'm going to look at the thing. So it's the next level exposure, as she calls it. It's kind of like, it's a follow-up on her, marketing efforts, and education for us earlier this year, much earlier this year, almost 12 months ago or 10 months ago. And so this is, just like marketing 102 or 202.
Actually, it's a 3rd installment.
It's a 3rd installment. So
Yeah,
here we are,
three.
301.
So
Okay.
301. Yeah.
301. We're all juniors now. Okay. We're upperclassmen.
This is one more time to get a degree.
Yeah, I mean, so, okay, Carol.
Take it away. I want to be the type of photographer who tells stories that linger, not the type of photographer that takes photos that scroll on by. But the truth is, even the most beautiful story can get lost and not shared if it's never found. Marketing for artists like us isn't about shouting louder. It's about getting found in the sea of images and work that's being created. And today we're going to talk about what that really means. We're going to continue our discussion about how to get our work out into the world. This is the 3rd installment of the marketing sort of presentation I've done. The first one, I think after the first one we did like I talked about the toolkit and a bunch of things that, what makes up some of the marketing that you can do. And we actually did a headshot where we took headshots of ourselves. So we had some marketing materials. And then we did a second one where we talked about goal settings and growing Instagram, and I'll review some of what we discussed. And it's kind of like peeling an onion. So what's going to happen is we're going to go on and go into a deeper dive on some of the things we talked about, and then also touch on some new areas. So again, it won't be a recap of everything from the first sessions, but we're going to build off of what we've done. So if you haven't seen the Ed, thank you, Ed, for taking wonderful videos. And also thank you, Patrick and Bill and everyone in the club. And thank you all for coming out tonight on this, it's horrible night out there, but we have a great session and we're nice and safe in here and dry so we can talk about our marketing and what it takes to get to the next level. But we'll touch on some things that we covered in the first sessions and dive deeper. I want to go more into, it's come up in a few times where we talked about judging and competitions, but one of the things we talked about is being more articulate about our work, being able to talk about our work in 2 to 3 simple sentences. It happens, I don't know if you've seen it, like when we do the competition night, if someone wins in the category, whatever, we hand them the mic. And I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but we hand you the mic and say, tell us about your image. And sometimes people don't know what to say, right? It's difficult to, if we could say it in words, we wouldn't need, we would need photos, right? And vice versa, right? So it can be hard sometimes to know what to say. So I thought I would touch a little bit on that about how we can be more articulate and speak better about our work. And then also just more about establishing our presence, both online and, in galleries and in other places. This material comes from, I do a lot online, as Patrick mentioned. I'm signed with, I have an art dealer in Paris, and I've signed with an art storefronts company in Austin, and I have access to a lot of marketing material that they give me. They give me coaching and marketing material and all that. And this isn't about selling any of those things. This is more about just sort of scraping some of that info and sharing it with you so that you can get the benefit of that as well. And I'm also not really a marketing coach. I'm not really a professional at this. I don't have, a degree in marketing. I came from a technical background and then took up photography. But I kind of taught this myself. And so there's a lot of tools out there that if you know of anything, by all means share. I try to share what I know, but I only know what I know, right? So I do this myself though. So because of that, I'm familiar with a lot of the stuff that's out there. And I always like to say too that everyone's marketing journey is unique, right? I may tell you, like, I don't do a lot with TikTok, for example. And, Arlie may say, oh, but I made $2 million a year on TikTok. And I'm going to say, that's great. Next year, make 4. It doesn't work for me, but if it works for you, use it. So use what works. And in general, I try to share this information because if the artist scene in Austin is buoyed, a rising tide lifts all boats. We will all do better if our marketing and our work is seen more. It will make people come, and it will make Austin more of an artist destination. And that makes it really useful for folks, useful for the artists here. So it elevates all of us when we all do better with our marketing. And just to review, last time we spent a lot of time on the mindset reset, what I call the mindset reset, right? We talked about imposter syndrome and tiara syndrome, and I won't go into this too much again, but just to touch upon them because they still are. Every time I go into an artist call, or now I'm on a lot of Zoom calls with other artists, and they always talk about imposter syndrome. It comes up more and more and more. And it's the idea that you feel like you're a fraud, your work is not good enough, you're not ready, you're a beginner, we talked last time about it being, or I think the first time, about it being part of artistic development is you reach a point where you have imposter syndrome. And the antidote to this is really just to accept the fact that your work is good enough. Your work is worthy of marketing. I've been a judge for this group before. I've seen the work, even the beginner category. Has everyone here been a judge, or, at least seen the categories, right? A lot of times what happens, the beginner categories come up and you think, wow, these people shouldn't really even be beginners, right? They're really good. So the group is making really good work. And so don't think that because you're in a beginner category or you just started that you can't market your work. Your work is good enough. So accept that, embrace that. And then likewise, tiara syndrome is the notion that if you just work harder and you stay in your, you squirrel away and toil, that someone will crown you with a tiara of success, right? And the fact is that no one is a better advocate for your work than you. And getting your work out there is a very proactive thing. Nobody is you need to get your work out into the world. It's not going to just fall out, like a bear out of a tree or something, right? Steven's not here, but you get the idea, right? You've got to kind of push it out into the world and get it out. And the people that have success are the people that it's not just because their work is good, but it's because they're putting it out there and going, if they get into 10 things a month, they're probably sending to 20 things and getting into 10, right? And so, it's very proactive. And we talked a little bit about being a brand. And it's not just about being a brand, but it's more about what does success mean to you? As a photographer, what does success mean? What does success look like? Where do you want to go? It might mean selling work. It might mean, saving the whales. It might mean doing something else, right? But it's a good idea to think about, close your eyes and think about what would success look like to you, right? And move in that direction, because photography is a big umbrella and you can easily get distracted off, one path or another, especially with social media, right? And if you want it, like if you always wanted to be in magazines and you start trying to apply for magazines and your friends say, oh, let's do a show, and you get distracted, you'll never do your magazine path, right? So make sure you're going the way you want to go. And then I think I also mentioned this in the first installment, but even if you're not thinking about showing your work or selling your work, it's a good idea to do certain things, like set up a mailing list, get business cards, grow your Instagram a little bit. these are things that in the future, if you should decide that you really want to go all in, they set yourself up for success later on down the road. So it's really important if you're sort of like, I'm not sure about this, get the mailing list, get the business cards, and get your Instagram tidy, I guess you could say. But also start to think about who you want to be and who you don't want to be, right? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as an artist who does fancy shows? Do you see yourself in galleries? Do you see yourself in magazines? And start to shape your world around that, right? Think about building a community around who you are and who you want to become as a photographer. We talked about, and this is really critical, I think it was the first session we talked about, I think I used the ice cream cart analogy. I said I had an ice cream cart and we're out at 2 o'clock in the morning in the parking lot, right? And no one bought any ice cream, right? And we said, well, it's because the sign is wrong or it didn't have enough sprinkles, or right? But the real problem is visibility, right? Visibility is the currency of everything that we do, right? If you have visibility, your work will, eyes on your work equates to success in marketing. It's just, that's it. And a lot of artists think that they have a quality problem, or maybe they have a problem with pricing, or they have other problems, but reality, it's just visibility. They don't have the right eyes on their work at the right time. And so visibility is like, think of it as our currency. And then we talked about Instagram. Instagram is probably the most important social media platform. It still remains king of social media for photographers. It is the place to see and be seen. We talked about how to give yourself I called it a glow up, right? I said, I'm actually going to skip ahead and show you this is my Instagram profile. And I think I can stand up, right? So I'll walk around a little, stretch a little. But you can see this is an older photo, but you see I have my bio here, right? And I have a little blurb about me. I say that I'm an artist or a photographer, right? I have a call to action, right? Discover Carol's Little World, right? So, and I have a link to my link tree, which has a list of links where you can find me. I have these highlight reels, right? And I share lots of information on Instagram. I share probably at least one post a day, sometimes more on Instagram. And I also share more than one type of post. I share single images, little reels, stories, and carousel posts, which are just multiple images that you sort of scroll through. And we talked about in the second installment, how to grow your Instagram. And I mentioned that you should try to get to 1,000 followers if you can on Instagram. If you get to 100 followers, Instagram Meta will show you insights about your work. They'll show you more statistics. If you get to 1,000 followers, your work will be shown to more people in general, and the algorithm will pick you up more. So it's better to get to 1,000 followers. So I think there's a few folks who took this to heart and grew did anybody grow their following? I know Patrick did. Patrick, can I share? Is it okay? So Patrick started growing his Instagram, and he told me he was growing his Instagram. And for a while, I was living vicariously through Patrick, because every day I would wake up and, I'd check my phone, because, oh, he's up to 646. Go, Patrick, go, right? And now I think he's going to pass me. I think he's got more followers than I do. 18, yeah, so he's really taken it to heart. So, and it doesn't take too long to get, what was your experience? Was it? Yeah, get Patrick the mic if you can.
Years. So the experience of growing an Instagram account, you do have to be diligent about it. Every morning I would get up and go in my office, and I would take a picture that I shot the day before and post it. And every morning at 6 o'clock, my wife would get up, or 6:30, or whatever time she got up, she would just look down the hallway. Oh, okay, he's down there, not a problem. And I was, and then I would pick up my camera and go for a walk and take pictures in my neighborhood, whether it was my regular camera or even my iPhone
iPhone.
and post stuff. And it was just 1 or 2 photos per day. About 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I just got to the point where it's like, oh my God, I've been doing this for, and it only took about 6 or 8 weeks to go from 100 to 18 or to 15 or 1600 by doing this every day. And there were lots of other things in between. You had to go
Sure,
out and
sure.
friend people, and you
Yeah.
waited for them to friend back. And then I started to figure out who to friend, to get a better response. And once I did that, then it started to take off, and now it's still growing. It's now organic. I haven't posted anything in months, and it still grows. So now I have to start posting some stuff and see if I can get the other 125 to get to 2,000.
Question.
Are you focusing on a particular market or a particular type of people?
That's an interesting question. At first, I started putting out my portraits and people pictures, and some did well, but most did not. And then I morphed into landscapes and some of the stuff that we would go do as a club. That tended to work better. And then it was interesting when we went downtown on our,
Yeah, the photo walk.
the
Yeah.
forced march photo walk that we did, and ended up on the top of one of the hotels. That picture, I put that one out, and that probably had the highest number of followers or likes, I guess it is, in the shortest period of time, because it was something everybody could relate to, which was downtown. People I'm like Carol, I have a lot of people from all over the world who are following me theoretically. And so when you put a picture of the Chizos Mountains in Big Bend, they can go, okay, it's another mountain, and that's it. But if you put a downtown kind of thing, something that people can really, really relate to, then they jump on it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, it takes like 4 to 6 weeks and, but it's a good idea to grow. And then the thing to realize is that now that he has these followers, as he posts, it's going to get out to more people, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good way to get, more, like you said, it will organically start to grow at some point, right? So that's how over time, it'll just blossom into, and mine is organically growing as well. I think mine's gone up from there, but we talked to you about, I think we went over this in the second installment. So there's a video we went into detail about how to do this. And I would recommend you try it if you haven't already, because it can be really beneficial to grow that Instagram count. And, in the second installment, we talked about using AI to grow your artist statement. And basically what we said was, I won't go over it all again, but basically we said, I recommend that you start with a few images and you take some writing that you have and you feed it into ChatGPT or your AI machine, and you ask it to describe the style of the writing, and then you ask for an artist statement in that style, and you tweak what you get. And if you look at the video from the second installment, we kind of went into that. And I'm not going to read this, but this is one of my artist statements. Actually, I wrote this one without the help of AI. I use AI now a lot for different things, but this was one that I had done for my poetry of ice work. So I think in the first installment, we talked about an elevator pitch. I know we talked about biographies, right? Where we talked about, how to write your biography. And when you write your biography, you're not writing it like, I don't write my biography for me, I write it for you, right? Because you want to make it interesting. So you want to read about me. And the elevator pitch is the same way. Basically what the elevator pitch is, it's two sentences or so about what you do. So mine would be like, hi, my name is Carol. I'm a fine art photographer from Texas. I shoot a lot of buildings, people, food. And my website is called Carol's Little World because I felt that somebody had to replace Pluto. It tells you a lot about me, right? It tells you I'm sort of quirky, oddball, sense of humor, what kind of photography I do, not too long, and it's brief, right? If you're in a show, sometimes you have to talk about the people in the show, the other artists in the show, right? The group itself. If you're, just recently I did the Austin studio tour, right? So I was doing gallery sitting. Has anyone here done gallery sitting? No. Okay, so what happens when you have a reception? You sit there with your work and like, let's say your photo, like we'll take this photo up here. I'm going to come up here. This photo, let's say this is my photo, right? And you might come into the gallery and I say, hi, welcome. Thanks for coming out. Is this your first time on the studio tour? And you tell me yes or no. Are you from the area? Well, let me tell you about the gallery. We have 23 artists in this rotating show and 10 resident artists here. And it's an all media show with everything from sculpture to photography to drawing. And please let us know if you have any questions. But the point is, when the person comes up, they're going to come up to you. You're going to talk, you want to greet them and talk to them, right? And you also want to be able to tell them about your work. Right, so you would say, this is one of my pieces celebrating the pumpkins and the fall vibe that you get. You know, I'm a photographer. You know, this is one of my pieces. This isn't one of my pieces, but you know, let's pretend. Right. So what I wanted to do was, I think we have an even number of people. What I wanted to do is can bring us to our first exercise. Yeah, question.
Something I want to chime in on this.
Sure.
All right.
Grab a mic.
So I saw this thing, and it was about getting a job, which is what you're doing.
Quite similar,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, hi, I'm Verlin. I'm from Gadsden, Alabama. I got into photography back when I was in high school and started off with a little disc camera. And are you still awake? I'm telling her about me, right? Hi, I'm Verlin. I help people tell amazing stories with photography. What I can do for her.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? That idea of, and yeah, it works in interviews too. Don't ramble.
Yeah.
One or two sentences,
Keep it short.
but what can I do for you?
Yes, yes. And that's a good point. Like I mentioned it here, but you mentioned it as well, right? If we have shows coming up, right? We have a show at Jester and the library, right? So if you go to the reception, don't stand there and go, this is my beautiful pumpkin photo. Arlie, don't you want to buy my beautiful pumpkin photo, right? What you do is you make it be about something bigger than yourself, right? You say, welcome to, this is the NAPfS show. We're a group of, 200 what are we, 150 photographers, right? And you ask questions. Are you from the area? Is this your first time? Are you from Pflugerville? Are you an artist? So a lot of times when you ask people questions, it gets them to open up and talk about themselves. And they're going to think they're hearing all about your photo, but they're going to talk more about themselves. So it's similar to what you're suggesting in that you make it be about, just like we did with the biography, right? You don't write this laundry list of I'm Carol, da 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 da. You make it so the person reading it is interested. The elevator pitch, the artist statement, the website, it's all the same. You want to make it so the person experiencing it is enjoying it, and they want to do more. And so, yes, that's a very good point, and keep it short. So what I wanted to do was divide up. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's do maybe like 20 minutes, 15 minutes less even. Maybe do teams of 2. And I'd like you to each present your elevator pitch to each other, and then pretend you are in a gallery and someone's come in, one of you pretend you just walked in and talk to the person and then swap roles. So I think we have an even number. So who has done an elevator pitch before? You've done an elevator pitch before, so we'll put you in an advanced group. So somebody who's never done it, partner with Verlin, and let's divide up. That's okay. Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm there.
So remember that Instagram is like your credit check or your business card, right? So what you want to do is you want to post like, regularly, like once a day or even once a week, right? Just to keep it going, right? And then the idea is you want to send your work out because as you send your work out, people are going to look at your Instagram and be like, oh, you're a real photographer, right? So that's the idea is now you want to go like growing your Instagram is an inward, it's like navel gazing, right? You want to get all those people to follow you, but now you want to go out into the world, right? So you want to actually find, if you want to do zines, find people who do zines and send them the work, connect with them on Instagram, right? Because when they connect with you, when they look you up on Instagram, they're going to see that you have those 2,000 followers and be like, oh, you're a real artist, right? So it gives you that credibility. So think of it as like a credit check, if you will.
Yeah, and I got the credit check side is.
We almost ready?
For the next.
Yeah. We're ready? So how was it? Did everybody feel really uncomfortable, stuck, a little bit? It's a little, it's a little hard.
Talking to Patrick was not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. It was actually pleasant.
Well, good.
It's really hard to make it concise, isn't it?
Well,
And stop talking, like make it concise, it helps and stop talking.
So there is an old saying that is wrong, and it is practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect, right? If you practice doing this, you'll get better at it, just like you will speaking English, playing piano, anything else. You practice this, you'll get good at it. But if you do it badly, you will get good at doing it badly. So there's a story about a police officer who was always worried that he was going to get into a gunfight. And I don't know why he was worried about that, but he was really worried about it. And so he practiced all the time at the range, and he would draw his gun. He'd fire 2 shots at the target. He wanted to get that quick draw down, so he never shot himself in the foot. And that's what he practiced. Draw 2 shots, start over. And as fate would have it, one day he did get into a gunfight. And he drew his gun and he fired 2 shots and put it away just like that. But the gunfight wasn't over because he practiced that every day. You practice bad habits, you will learn bad habits. You practice it, you get good at it. You can learn anything.
So, but it's really important to start, or to, even if you don't want to sell your work, it's really important to learn to speak about your work. And yes, it's right. There's that old saying about, I'm sorry I wrote you a long letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one. We need to be concise as well as be able to be articulate about our work. And it can be really difficult sometimes to know how to question.
comment, what I needed to do was figure out who I am, what I want to present to the world. That takes self-assessment and reflection.
It's a 2-step process, right? You have to figure out what you want, who you want to be, and then you have to sort of present it in a way that's pleasing to the other person, right? Because the idea is you want to get them to buy your, not buy your story, but buy into, the idea is whenever we do any of these things, right, it's for the viewer, it's for the people who we're reaching, it's for our community, right? That's who we're pulling in. Think of it as a bubble. You're pulling people, you're captivating people, right? And I remember I was doing I'll be brief, but I wanted to cover this. When I was doing an invitational exhibit up in New Hampshire, so I flew up to New Hampshire, and it was my work from China, and we were on stage. It was the former ambassador to China was there, and a whole bunch of folks were there, and they had us on this. It was like a platform like this. There were 8 of us on stage, and there was Tillman Crane, who's the fellow I went to China with. For those of you who don't know, Tillman was once an assistant to Ansel Adams. He's been a very lifelong photographer. He does platinum prints. He's a very darkroom master, a very good photographer, very experienced. And there was a bunch of us on stage, and we went down the line and talked a little about our experience and our work and everything. And it came to me and I babbled a little bit. I kept it short. I didn't babble too long. But then the guy next to me and the person next to me really didn't do a very good job talking at all. He just sort of said, well, I took some photos in China. And then Tillman went, and when Tillman started talking, it was kind of like I was watching the Tillman Hour on TV. In fact, it was more entertaining than some TV shows I've seen. He told stories. He really, it gave you a sense, it was captivating. It made you feel like you wanted to be there, like you wanted, you're sitting on the edge of your seat, listening to what he had to say. It was really captivating. It drew you in. And I realized in that moment that I didn't do my photography any favors. I didn't lose anything, but I could have done, I left it on the table. I could have done a lot more had I been a lot more articulate about my work. Right. And the guy, between me and Tillman, who really just, oh, I went to China and took a few photos. If someone was interested in his work, they wouldn't have been after they heard him talk, right? I mean, I hate to be blunt, but that's what happened. So it's interesting to think about, like, whether you write or whether you do video or whether you talk about your work, it's a way to pull people in and share the stories of your work with those people. So when we think about branding and everything, yes, it's about who you want to connect with, but also you want to pull those people into your world, right? So it's kind of interesting to think about. So I wanted to talk a little bit about ways you can promote a show, right? Because we touched upon this a little bit. First off, there's one thing that happens whenever you do anything, whether it's a show, whether it's a competition, whatever you do, whether it's a talk, whether it's an artist statement, two things can happen. You will succeed. Let's say you go do a big show and you want to sell some work, right? You sell some work, you succeeded, right? If you don't sell anything, you didn't fail. What you did was you learned, right? You will either succeed or you will learn. Well, what did you learn? Well, let's look at some of the lessons we learned from our recent shows, right? We did a show I can pick on the Water to Wine show, right? We did that recently, right? We learned that that's a great venue, right? It's smaller than we thought. Remember, we thought we'd have more pieces, right? We learned, oh, we can't hold that many pieces, right? The guy was very cooperative, right? He was able to he gave us a reception, right? He was able to help promote it, right? He was trying to grow his mailing list as well, right? But we also knew that he doesn't have a huge mailing list because we didn't have a lot of people come to the opening, right? But what we did learn was we had some photographers come to the opening, right? So that's another thing. If you want to grow a group, if you want to grow a photo group, one of the best ways you can do it, probably the best way, is to do exhibits and invite photographers to openings. When a photographer comes to an opening reception and they see the beautiful photos, they think, oh, if I'm in this group, I'm going to make photos like that. And every show I've been in that's a photography group or has photography in it, if it's affiliated with a group, people will want to join the group. Clay's nodding, like he knows I'm right. I'm right, right? I'm right about this, right? The best way to grow a group is to do a show, have a reception, and get other photographers to the reception and grow the group that way. It works better than any advertising or anything you can do, right? But the basics, some of the things we can do, some of the things we knew better, some of the things we did, some of the things we didn't do. So I have here, build an online presence, right? Create a landing page with a date, time, and info. Ed, I'm going to pick on Ed, was very nice of us because he put that info on our website, right? So thank you, Ed, for putting that up. So we had a place that people could look and see where our show was going to be and what date and time. So that was done, right? We did a graphic that we could use for marketing. We just threw something simple together. Actually, I made a mistake and spelt like reception wrong. Luckily, Ed caught that. And thank you again, Ed. But we did a graphic that we could share and use and put out into the world. Now, if you don't want to use a graphic, you can use a photo from the exhibit, whatever works, right? Some image or something. Host a reception, right? We talked to the Water to Wine guy and asked him, like, hey, can we have a reception, right? We did talk to him, we kind of, and he was agreeable, right? But that's something you can do. A lot of times when you do a show, they don't always give you a reception, right? You have to ask for it. So it's something to think about. Like you do a show at the library, you can ask them, hey, can we have an opening, a closing reception, right? If you want to recruit members, if you want to sell work, you're more likely to do it at a reception than anywhere else. It also gives you that opportunity to talk about your work. The exercise that you all just did, you would get to do that with your work in front of you at a real reception. So think about, sometimes you have to ask for a reception. They don't always volunteer, right? And sometimes they'll say no, and that's fine, but then you learn that that venue doesn't allow receptions, right? And the next time you do a show, you say, well, I want to do a reception, but they won't let me. Then right? Post to social media. right? You can post countdowns, behind the scenes, short videos, lots of stuff, lots of content when you do a show that you can share on social media, right? On Instagram, we talked about Instagram, you can create reels, carousels, previews, stories, right? This is how, like you were saying, look, what do I do? I have this Instagram following now, right? Well, when you do a local show, you can get people to come to the show. And I want to talk about this for a second because it's really important. A lot of people say to me, well, I grew my Instagram, but I only have other artists following me and they're not going to buy my work. I'm only talking to other artists. And there's a fallacy about that. I want to correct that because for one thing, other artists are more likely to like and heart and repost your work. And so the more your work gets likes and comments and whatnot, the more Instagram, the algorithm will share it out to the world. So the more, like, Patrick talked about growing his followers. Now he has like close to 2,000, right? Now his work is going to be shared with more people when he posts. If those people on his 2,000 were all artists, it's still going to be shared more. It doesn't matter if an artist hearts your post or if a non-artist hearts your post. It's going to go out more to the world, the way the algorithm works. So that's one thing. Another thing is you find out about opportunities through other artists, the way you find out about shows, about venues, about people buying work. That's one way you do that. And if you're followers, if you're following other artists, you're going to hear they got into a show, they sold a piece. Oh, they did a show over here and sold a piece. Maybe I should do a show there, right? When we posted the Water to Wine, our followers saw that, oh, that's a place you can go do a show, right? When I was doing the studio tour, an artist friend of mine came and she said, I saw you did a show, you posted on Instagram, you did a show over at Water to Wine. Can you tell me about that venue, right? See, there you go. She's finding out about a venue through Instagram. So it isn't useless to just share among other artists on Instagram, right? There's lots of reasons for that, but again, it amplifies your voice as you post and share. Facebook, you can create an event page. TikTok, you can create videos if you're on the talk. Email list, if you have that email list, again, you want to do a 3 email sequence, right? You want to do an announcement like, hey, I'm having a show, opening reception on, July 3rd or whatever. Then you want to do a reminder email. Don't forget next week is the opening. If you're in town, come join me. And then maybe like a see you tomorrow, right? The day before, send it out. Facebook groups are a good way to get out. There's like Austin art groups. There's Precision Camera has some groups, right? So here's an example. We did the show at Water to Wine. It's right down the street from Precision Camera. If we really wanted to get a whole bunch of new members, one of the things we could do is put invites, put in the Facebook group for Precision, like, hey, come down the street, look at our photos. We're having a reception, come have some wine and cheese with us. And that would have gotten us more members than we did, right? So it's something to think about, especially if you're right near the camera store. But that's something for the future as well. A catalog, some people will do a catalog. For those of you who were in the Round Rock Image Creators did a Jester show last year, I guess it was, and Mary from this group did a catalog, a program of that group for them, and that's a good way to make the show sort of live on afterwards. You can do giveaways. That's another thing. You can partner with local businesses. Again, you can talk to other galleries. That's a little harder, but cooking, co-working spaces, apartment complexes, boutiques, anything like this, Precision Camera, again, other art groups, you can talk to them and say, hey, we're doing a show. Can you, help promote our show? Local media, I added us to the Do 512 list for the Water to Wine show. So we were included on there's a website called Do 512 and they send out mail about what's happening in town. So I added us to that, but that's something you can do. You can talk to newspapers, do press releases, right? You can, of course, always ask your friends, colleagues, models, all these people, right? And then the biggest thing is if the vendor, if the owner, if anybody puts, we talked about Patrick growing his Instagram. If Patrick puts an invite up, hey, we've got a show, the best thing you can do is give him a heart, give him a like, and repost that invite. Because again, the more people like and heart and repost it, the more Instagram will show it to a lot of people. I mentioned I did this Austin studio tour, which was the past 2 weekends. they had a hashtag Austin Studio Tour, and everybody was posting and reposting. And if you're on Instagram, you saw all about the tour, who was on the tour, who was, oh, this is happening, this is happening. It got to where we owned the Austin hashtags, right? Because there's so many, there's, 700 artists on the tour and everybody's posting. And that's how you build momentum. When I was gallery sitting, I tried to get data. I tried to do data marketing, right? So I looked at the data that I got when I could get it. And you can't always ask people, how did you get here? What made you come? But I found out some things. Most people came either because they saw it on Instagram, they saw my Instagram post, or they saw a Instagram post, or they saw it on KUT. That's how they heard about the studio tour. So it was KUT and Instagram were the two biggest drivers for the studio tour. And I can tell you that without a doubt, because we heard that from, hundreds of people came into those galleries the time I was sitting there, and everyone said either KUT or they heard about it on Instagram. So it's just something to think about the next time you do a show. And you don't have to do it you don't have to do everything every time you do a show, but maybe think about ways you can do more to help promote the show. And even if you don't have work in the show, it's a good way to help others in the show to promote the work. Like just hearting a post on Instagram doesn't take that much time. And it can help expand the reach of that post. And the group would get to benefit from it. And then changing gears a little bit, earlier this year, because I have access to some of these folks, I was on a Zoom call with a guy named Magnus Rush, who's he's author of the book, How to Become a Successful Artist. And he is one of the leading art market economists in the world. He also is a professor at Yale University. He teaches about the art market economy, which I didn't even know was a thing, but he talks about like, if you go to like Art Basel Miami and you go to their website, they do a thing on the status of the art market for 2025. And he's involved in a lot of those statistics and facts and data that gets created as part of some of the larger, like, if you're following the news this week, for example, another thing that happened was a Klimt painting just sold gavelled down for a record at Sotheby's. I think it was 236 million. So it was a record for a painting sold this week. So he's involved in, he doesn't buy them, but he's involved in that sort of thing. He keeps track of like how the art market is doing in general and how artists can cut through get that visibility. And he talked about, on the call, he talked about 3 things that you can do that he noticed successful. In his book, he interviewed I think it was 40,000 artists around the world. And he distilled down what some of them were doing that made them successful and what some of them were not doing that made them not successful. And that's what he put in the book. And he basically, these are going to sound kind of familiar, but he basically said, change your mindset, right? Become an entrepreneur. You have to think in terms of like financial, but also treat it like a business, basically, is what he said. The artists that treat it like a business are the ones who become the most successful. And for me, one of the things I do is I like to have fun with it, right? Like, for example, with Instagram, they tell you to grow your Instagram by doing reels and little videos. And I hated doing those. Like, I don't want to make these stupid videos, right? But then I found that there's these AI tools and you can have a lot of fun with them. And one day I was up until 2 o'clock in the morning and I made like animated dogs talking and I made the dogs playing poker and I had them say, we're sick of being on your wall. Go buy some art from Carol's Little World. I did all this stuff. I had a blast. And I still post some of those up there, fun as can be. I had so much fun with it. I thought this is like the most fun I've had with, this marketing stuff. And it took something that I hated and put it into something I liked to do, enjoyed, had fun with. So anytime you can, think of it as another art form that you can kind of have fun with. And then also for me personally, I worked in the tech industry for a long time. And I never did anything on the business side. I don't come from a business background, although people in my family do. So when I started doing Carol's Little World, I treated it like I was learning. And I'm a lifelong learner. I always like to learn new things. So I treated it as like, I'm learning an MBA without going to school, without paying that big tuition, right? I've got my little business and I'm learning what it takes to create, make, and grow a business, right? By doing this. I'm a solo entrepreneur, if you want to call it that, right? And so that learning aspect also keeps me going, right? Because I say, oh, I'm going to learn how to, like now we're coming to Black Friday, right? So I'm doing all my Black Friday stuff. So I'm learning what all these businesses do to capitalize on all that Black Friday stuff, right? So I'm learning all this kind of stuff. And then he talks a lot about like what they call guerrilla marketing, right? If let's say you're in a town and there's a gallery in a town and it's an established gallery, if you do what the gallery does, you won't be as successful as the gallery because the gallery's been in town for a long time. They're already established. They already have a big mailing list. They already have clients. They already have customers. You don't have any of that, right? So you can't go head to head with them, right? So what you have to do is you have to think outside the box. You have to do guerrilla marketing, right? You have to think of ways you can cut through, right? So maybe instead of selling your work in a gallery, sell it in a boutique, or think of new ways you can sell it, new ways you can put your work out there and get that all too critical visibility, right? And then of course the number 3 thing is Instagram. He mentioned, a lot of people hate Instagram, but Instagram is key. It is the cheapest, most actionable tool you have to be successful. And he said, think of it as your business card because people will go, if you go anywhere and you say, here's my work, they're going to look you up on Instagram and see what you got on the gram. So, and there's all kinds of studies. They estimate that 60 to 70% of art sales are, when I say go through Instagram, I mean the person will look you up on Instagram. They don't do the buy now on Instagram, but they look you up on Instagram. And I wanted to talk some numbers around this because he talked about this. A lot of people think, oh, there's a starving artist and you'll never make money as a photographer, right? What they call the creator economy is, according to Forbes, is worth $250 billion globally. And it's estimated to double in size by 2027. And consumers are more drawn towards artists and small brands and authentic voices than ever before. I always like to say photographers make the best dinner guests because we tell the best stories, right? We always have all these stories about travel, about the shots we take, about the people we've met, right? But a lot of times we don't know how to share these awesome stories on social media, right? Where maybe artists are introverts or our stories just don't resonate, or we just don't know how to communicate them in such a way that, it makes you want to buy into what we're doing. It doesn't always translate into the social media posts, the blog posts, the video even, so there's a gap between the way we live in our lives and what we do as a creative and what we show to the world. And it's unfortunate because that's the area where we would benefit and that would translate into that visibility if we could harness that. And again, there's some data points here, but 61% of consumers say they trust recommendations from creators or artists more than they trust big box stores, right? They would rather buy something from an artist. Consumers will pay more for a brand they trust, and they'll spend more to keep a small business going. It's just, again, these are all from Forbes. This isn't from, made up numbers. But if you want more sales as a photographer, a lot of times you have to understand that sometimes that consumer is buying into your story and then they're picking out the individual piece that you have. So that's the other thing. You want them to kind of fall in love with you and then buy a piece from you. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit. This is another critical one because we had a little exercise where we talked about our, elevator pitch, and I told you my pumpkin photo, right? I call this my secret math formula for telling stories, right? So I'm going to come over here so Ed can actually film me better and I can stretch my legs a little bit. Think of it, and I hate to hit you with a math problem. I know it's kind of hard, but it's simple addition, right? So I know it's raining, I know nobody wants to do math, but just put that aside for a second. So it equates to your background plus what you did to get the shot, the hard times, the endurance you had to do, plus what makes the image unique. That's where your story gold is. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's dive into it a little bit. Your background. Do you have an art degree? Do you have a degree? Did you go to college? Did you study photography? Did you practice photography? Did you have a mentor? How did you learn photography? Did you do workshops? Are you in organizations where you learned? Did you participate in competitions, right? Nobody has the same background that you have. That background makes you unique, right? You may think, well, but I participated in the group competitions for years. What does that? There are other photographers that haven't. They don't have the benefit of hearing all the judges talk about their work. They don't have, by you participating in the club and putting an image in every month, it forces you to edit your image, to look at an image, to pick out an image that goes to a theme. It's putting in the work, right? And that work can make you stand out among other photographers. It sounds silly, but it's there. And then sort of the pain you went through to get the shot. And you may say, well, but I just took a photo, right? Well, did you go out early in the morning? Did you wait for just the right light? Did you use just the right camera, just the right lens? Did you hike? Did you climb up a tree, right? Did you wait for the right moment? What was the pain you took that someone else maybe didn't take, right? That's making your shot, and that can make your story unique. And then what makes the image unique, right? Basically, let's say you take a photo of, I don't know, a tree, right? Go to Etsy, go to Saatchi, look for their trees and tell me how your trees are different from their trees. What is different about your image from the other ones? Maybe you shoot flowers, right? You live in Texas, you shoot Texas bluebonnets, right? Well, other places don't have Texas bluebonnets, right? That's something unique to Texas, right? There's your story. That's where your story gold lies, right? In what's unique. So I'll give you an example of this. Several years ago, who here has a photo of a tree? Raise your hand. Does anyone not have a photo of a tree? Because I want to meet somebody who doesn't have okay, so everyone's taken a photo of a tree, right? So who here has sold a photo of their tree? I have. And this is how I did it, right? I used, unknowingly, actually, I used the story, right? Because what happened was I was out in Washington State and I was on a workshop that was by portfolio review only. I had to apply to get in, and I was on this fancy workshop. And I went with a bunch of friends of mine. We all got in, and we rented a car, and we were driving around Washington. We were in the San Juan Islands on Whidbey Island. And there's a place called Deception Pass. And so we were trying to make it to Deception Pass before the sunset. And we were on this race to get to Deception Pass, right? So we got this rental car, we got this crappy rental car. We're trying to get to Deception Pass to photograph the bridge and some other stuff, right? And we made it before sunset. It's like, how exciting is that, right? And then I get out of the car, and in the parking lot, there's this really cool red tree. And I'm like, well, this thing's really cool. So I take some photos of this red tree. And I'm like, well, this is a strange tree. I've never seen one like this before, right? So as it turns out, the red trees that are located in Deception Pass only grow in Deception Pass. They're like these endangered trees that don't appear anywhere else. And I was on this workshop that was by portfolio review only with a very prominent photographer. And I had this big story about making it to Deception Pass before sunset, right? Now I want you to imagine two Instagram posts, right? One where I put up my red tree and I say, this is a tree in Washington State. And one where I put up my red tree and I tell you that whole story that I just tell you. I was racing the clock, I was taking a workshop, right? I made it to Deception Pass, and look at this rare tree that only grows in Deception Pass. You see what happens? I could tell, like, all of you, when I started talking about this story, you were all like, oh, where's this gonna go? What's she gonna do with this, right? But if I put up this tree and it says it's a tree in Washington State, you'd be pretty bored. Right? So the stories that you tell can come from, and again, the idea about the stories is you want to keep it short and sweet, but you want to focus on the math problem, right? Your background, what you did to get the shot, and what makes it unique. And that will help, tell those stories. So in the old days, we had a lot of gatekeepers, right? We had to go through galleries, and the galleries were gatekeepers. They kept track of our work, right? And those days are gone. We can go directly to the public. We can go to Instagram. There's an artist, Magnus talked about, CJ Hendry. She has 914,000 followers on Instagram. Her career is completely made on Instagram. She has I think she was in a gallery in New York this year, but for the longest time, she has no gallery representation whatsoever. She had no galleries telling her what to sell, what to show. She just did everything on Instagram. Because of this, the artist role is changing, right? In the past, we had to get galleries to represent us, right? But now it might behoove us as artists to work on market research and figure out what might sell better. So did I miss a slide? Yeah. So in the old days, I don't know about you, but I started in film photography, and they used to have rolls of film with 36 exposure. And if I went out for a whole day, I would shoot maybe, 10 rolls of film, right? So if you do the math, again, sorry, there's math in this, but that gives you 360 frames of film, right? But now with the digital era, I can shoot, 2,000 frames in a morning. I mean, it's really ridiculous, right? You can just shoot and shoot and shoot, right? And on top of this, we have all kinds of Photoshop and Lightroom. We have all kinds of editing tools that I can edit my images very, very quickly. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword because now everybody expects us to have perfect images, right? And Instagram, go through Instagram, you see all these perfect images all the time. You think, oh gosh, there's all these images, right? But how does this impact our marketing? And basically, instead of spending time getting the images like we did in the past, right, it might be a good idea to spend a little time doing market research. So you still shoot those 2,000 images, but what you do is you look at ones that maybe even 3 or 5 of them that maybe you can market. And the rest of them you still take, you still keep, but you just realize that those are not going to be the ones that market. So instead of spending all the time editing, developing the film, all of that, we spend maybe a little bit of time doing market research. So which images from those 2,000 would resonate better with a market, in our market? So again, you look at your tree photos, you look at Saatchi, you look at Singular, you look at Fine Art America, you look at Etsy, all of this, and you see how your trees are different from the trees that are there. And if you can't answer that question, and this is where you can also use AI tools, right? AI is very helpful to determine what's marketable. You can put it into AI and say, hey, what would be a market for this? A lot of my work now is doing data-driven marketing, right? I use the AI, I look at things like Rocket Mortgage data, and I look at the places where people are moving. And then I look at the type of house that would buy the type of photograph I'm taking. And then I map those together and try to find boutiques or shops in that galleries sometimes in those areas where my work would fit. And that's where I target my results. That's one way I do it. So one of the things I don't use AI to create my images, but what I do is I use it to refine my voice with my artist statement. I use it to help me generate content, a lot of social media posts very quickly. And I use it to help me define my brand, right? I use it to, and I use it to do market research. So that's something you can use. You can use the AI tools a lot to help you find like, hey, is this image marketable? Where could I sell it? What, I want to try to sell it in a boutique. What boutiques near me might want to take it and all of that. So it's something to think about. And again, we mentioned this a little bit last time, but there's different ways you can sell, right? You can sell your work through a gallery. You can sell direct to the public with a shop. You can sell through art fairs. You can do commissions. And one of the biggest things is co-branding, right? And what that involves is working with other businesses. Again, it goes back to that guerrilla marketing we were talking about a few minutes ago, right? Think about like to give you an example, I went to Cuba and photographed like some old cars in Cuba, right? Well, there's now a Cuban restaurant up in Round Rock, right? I could think about ways I could co-brand with the restaurant, maybe do a giveaway, maybe do a calendar or something with them, right? And those are ways that you can co-brand. It doesn't have to be, it can be other photographers, but it doesn't have to be. It can be other restaurants or other places, boutiques and things like this, right? And that's a good way. That's one of the best ways to grow and to get your work in front of people and to increase your sales. So we talked about this, I think, the first time, but again, Magnus said the same thing, but basically mindset reset, having tools in place to help yourself, and all important visibility, right? But then I also mentioned most of the photographers I see being successful, they are one of 3 ways, right? They have a certain look to their work, they have a certain subject, or they're able to gauge an aesthetic. They're able to, when someone comes in, they're able to say, oh, I think you would like this photo, and give them what they would like. Read the room, in other words. And I mentioned there's 3 people. Gray Mallon is a certain look. Jonah Allen is a certain subject, and Joe McNally is someone that is engaged in aesthetic. And I wanted to touch on this a little bit more because we talked about different types of websites, right? We talked about the virtual portfolio, where you basically someone hosts, you're hosting your work somewhere. The splash page, which is, the grid like Instagram, and the storefront where you sell direct. And then if you look at, like, I wanted to show this because I think it drives the point home a little bit more. You can see here on the left, this is Gray Mallon's website, and this is only ad. So all of his work has this sort of light pastel color. And then subject-wise, Jonah Allen is the one in the middle. He has 4 buttons. And they're like, oceans, sand, seascapes, they're basically all ocean, water, ocean. And then on the right, you can see that is Joe McNally's website. And if that kind of scrolls down, landscape, he shoots day, he shoots night, he shoots event photography. I think he's got Aretha Franklin. And he's just shoots black and white, color. He doesn't narrow it down. He shoots a little bit of everything. He's the gauge and aesthetic guy. And it's important to think that if you are the gauge and aesthetic, if you are the Joe McNally type, there are some you can do, like it might pay to spend some of your time learning how to gauge that aesthetic. So hone that skill. A lot of people, because I've taught this class now, if you tell me, oh, I shoot birds and things, but I really should only try to sell one of them. You don't have to do that. Beyonce made a country album, right? You don't have to narrow stuff down to one, right? You can sell a little bit of everything, right? But what you may want to do is learn how to gauge that aesthetic. So some of the things you can do is you can look at, like, Pinterest can help you. You can use Pinterest boards to sort of, group your images. Pay attention to non-photo based clues like music and fashion, right? And you say, how do I do that? Well, think about your images. Like if you shoot a lot of landscapes, that's kind of like country music, right? If you shoot a lot of crumbled down buildings, that's blues music, right? How do they go together? Right? It sounds kind of silly, but it can help you mentally think about how your images could work together if you are someone that doesn't just shoot one subject. And, not all of you are going to be this way, but I thought I would mention this because a lot of people bump into this sort of roadblock. And then also kind of learn to deconstruct, right? Is there a common element, is common thread in the images? Does the work have some kind of connection, and build off of that? And then this is probably the most important one. There's a lot of places like Praxis, Photoplace, a lot of places that do shows. A Smith Gallery is another one, right? They do calls for entry, like sometimes 1 and 2 times a month. And they'll put up, like water, or they'll put up another theme, blue, Valentine's Day, whatever, right? So look at their shows and read the call for entry, even if you don't enter the show, and think about like what you would send into the show of your work. And then when they announce the show, they usually share the work that got in, right? So go back and look at the work that got in and think about, well, how would my work have fit? And that will help you sort of gauge that aesthetic and figure out, like, oh, I was off, or I was right about, guessing, and I'll kind of skip over this a little bit, but one of the things that's happening now is when you start to build out your website, a lot of things that's happening is a lot of artists are moving into making it an experience, right? So a lot of folks use the Adobe free tools, and that's great. That's a good idea to do. I highly recommend free stuff if you can leverage it. But you want to think about, we talked about storytelling aspect of your website, right? But I mean, of your images. But it's a good idea to also think about, when you do your website, to actually make it an experience. Make it, again, it's the same thing with your biography, with your elevator pitch, right? You want to make it so the other person is living vicariously and really engage in what you're doing. It's really not for you. It's for the person coming to your website, your clients, your patrons, your customers, your students, your whatever, right? So think about the entire experience, because 5, 10 years ago, it was great to have a website. There weren't many artists with them. Now everybody has one, right? So the folks who are making the most immersive websites are the ones who are, winning in this regard, right? So, and immersive doesn't have to be expensive, right? You can do, again, your captions on your websites can be those stories that we talked, you can go to that story map that we talked about, right? Really pull the person in and sequence the work in such a way that you really pull people in. Again, the successful artist from 5 years ago had a website. The successful artist of today has an online experience. And I won't go to his website, but I mentioned Drew Doggett. He's a photographer that has done a lot of work in this, and I would recommend you check out his website. Your website will never be finished. It's always going to be a work in progress. So don't wait to do your marketing before your website is done. But what you should do is look at a lot of other artists' websites, look at their Instagram, look at their mailing list, and kind of Austin Kleon talks about this, steal like an artist, right? Get inspiration from these places and use it in your marketing as well. And you really want to try to create an experience, even for your Instagram, your artist statement, all of that. It should all tie together. It should be on brand and that experience that just drags people in. So how are we doing on time? I'm going to wrap it up soon. But last time we talked a little about goals, right? We talked about, I think a lot of folks said they were going to try to sell one piece, right? Did anybody do the goals? No, no, kind of, yes, maybe. Okay. So, it's the end of the year again, right? We only have one meeting left and it's our holiday party. So don't forget to go to our holiday party. But this is a good time to start thinking about the goals for next year. All right. If you wanted to sell work and you didn't sell work, don't fret, but think about what you can do next year. Right. And they say, like, if you write your goals down, you have an increased chance in achieving them. Right. So I thought I would share, and again, I'll send everybody the slides. We'll put these online so you can download them. But basically, this is a goal tracker. I do it monthly, but you can do it yearly as well. Basically, what you do is you say, how many days a month or a year do you want to do, marketing? And how many transactions do you want to complete? And when we did the goals, we talked about maybe doubling next year doesn't involve just selling more. It might mean selling bigger prints. It might mean having more clients. It could mean reducing your costs, right? Because if you cut your costs in half, you get twice as much money, right? So there's lots of ways to double without actually doubling, right? Another thing is you may sell 10 prints, right? But next year, if you sell 10 large prints, you're making a lot more money, right? And sometimes people will sell 5x7s, right? But then if you sell bigger, you might only sell 2 or 3 or 4 big prints, but then that's, if you're selling them for limited edition and very large, you're getting a lot more money than the 5x7s, right? So it's a little hard to think when you start moving into the marketing aspect of it, how that can happen. So they recommend you take your social media followers plus your email leads, and that becomes your total audience. Right. So you add up your total audience and then you multiply your total audience by the number 0.02 to get your transaction goal for like the month. Right. So that would give you their transaction goal. And then that's what you shoot for. And then also it's important to give yourself, affirmation. Like, I want to be successful this month, this year, because, and think about that big picture, where you want to go with your photography. What do you want to do? And then objectives can be things like you want to take a class, you want to learn how to work your flash, you want to go to the Tetons and photograph, whatever. And then also keep track of your wins and losses. Again, this is your learning, right? Your wins and your learning. And then keep track of your transactions, your sales, and your followers. Because remember, as you add followers, they're not going to turn into sales right away, right? But they may lead to sales. So again, I'll give you a quick example. Like, if you add a lot of followers on Instagram, even if they're other artists, one of those artists may tell you about an opportunity. You may get into a gallery show, and that gallery show, you may sell work, right? So indirectly, that Instagram follower gave you a sale, even though that person was another artist and they didn't buy from you directly, right? So as you add followers, it takes time for those followers to turn into sales. Marketing sort of precludes sales, right? You market first and then eventually you pivot to sales, right? So think about, there's ways you want to get your Instagram folks onto your mailing list, but there's also ways you want to outreach and go to, galleries, other venues where you can actually, and that Instagram is going to serve as your credit check and you make sure you're that real artist. And so to wrap it up, we talked a lot of stuff. The mindset reset, right? Having your mind in a good spot, right? A lot of the tools we're still using. And of course, that all important visibility. It's really important. And I wanted to read this. I think this is really important to end on. I actually, in the spirit of Austin Kleon, I actually blatantly stole this off the internet, but I think it's so good that I'm going to share it. So start before you are ready. Create before you feel inspired. Market before you're confident. Refine after you move. Share the process. Learn in public. Ask for feedback. Perfection is procrastination. Visibility is a muscle. Execution is clarity. Authenticity is the strategy. Marketing is not magic, it's motion. It's telling the truth about what you believe until the right people recognize themselves in your words. You're not just an artist, not just a photographer. You're a builder, a maker, a creative force. You are a change maker, a visionary, and now you can have a platform for it all. And with that, I'll open it for questions. I know it's late and everybody's burnt out, but any questions? Everybody's still trying to digest what they just saw and heard. Don't be shy. Question, Clay.
Would you share a goal that you were thinking about doing in terms of the club or in terms of work?
Sure. So one thing, I'm glad you asked that question because it brings up a good point. I'm looking at my goals from last year and how I did. And one of the things that I noticed, because this is another thing, when you look at your goals, how you did, you can spot trends and see. So one of the things was I made my goals for print sales for the year, but my publications were off the hook. I think last year I made it into, I want to say at least 10 publications. And usually every year I get published once or twice. It was just an absurd number of publications. So again, we talked about, remember the ice cream cart, right? We said you're out in the parking lot and you have the wrong sprinkles and the wrong sign. And we said, you don't know, you might still have the wrong sprinkles and the wrong sign, but you've got to get the ice cream cart in front of people and get that all important visibility. And then you'll have the data point to be able to tell, do you have, are your sprinkles good? Is your ice cream tasty? Is your sign right? You may still have that problem, but unless you have the visibility, you can't tell, right? So what happens when you start to work with this, as your marketing advances and you start to get, data points, now I can say, gee, I have all this magazines, right? So what's happening, right? So now I have to look at like what happened. So one of the things I can do, there's a couple reasons for this, right? So we have a few minutes. I'm going to dive into this for a second. So it could be that there's just more magazines and they're looking for work, right? That could be what's happened. It could be that my work is just spectacular. I don't think that's the case. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not any better than anybody else's, right? What else could it be? It could be that all important visibility. Remember, we talked about visibility. People buy ice cream from the ice cream cart that they see when they're hot and on the beach and they want ice cream, right? So maybe by me doing a lot of stuff on Instagram, the magazine publishers are on Instagram and they're coming across my work. And that's how, because I have a visibility to them, that's why they're finding me more. Right. So now if my print sales are not where I want them to be, maybe that tells me that my print buyers are not on Instagram as much. So I have to either rethink, right, and go find them, go find where they live and hunt them down, right? Or I can think about doing more publication work and say, well, I've tapped into this publication. Maybe I can lean in and do more. And that's actually what I started to do. Towards the end of the year, I realized I was getting all this publication traction and I went, So I started trying for bigger and better magazines. And I'm happy to reveal that Art Doc magazine recently, which is more difficult to get into. I've been published in the last 2 art doc magazines. And so I was very happy about that. And now what this means is because I'm outreaching and I'm getting into more magazines and things, I'm going to now go up. I'm going to go harder, harder magazines to get into. Right? I hope to be rejected, but that's the idea, right? I'm going to push my stuff out. I'm going to push myself to do more. Right? I'm not Tiarison. I'm going to get out there and try to do more. But that's something to think about is as you do your goals, you can be, but you want to make sure, we talked about your version of success, right? You want to make sure you don't go off topic. Like if I don't want to be a magazine photographer, I need to now adjust and say, well, I'm getting all this magazine. I better stop and try to get the prints. Or maybe I do want to do more magazines and say, well, okay, but I should make that choice, right? Not the choice shouldn't be made for me. So does that answer your question? My goals for next year are probably going to be around print sales, magazines. I want to make a more immersive topic for my blog. And then I want to work on getting an artist residency because I would like to do an artist residency at some point. So those are going to be my big goals for the year overall. So you had a question?
No more comments. I just did a class on this, or working on a class on this for work. So
Awesome.
goals. I'm sure everybody here's heard of SMART goals, right? Everybody knows SMART goals. If you just use SMART goals, they will fail you. She talked about getting 1,000 Instagram followers. She ran the marathon, she got 1,000 Instagram followers, and then she rested. Simon Sinek, who I can't recommend enough, wrote a book called The Infinite Game. Work is not a game like chess. In chess, there's rules. I win, she loses. And the only way I can win is if she loses. Work, whether it's this or my day job, is an infinite game. And
You can grow the pie.
you always go, there's always tomorrow. There's no amount of work I can do today that will give me a week off next year. And I don't get a bye week in the playoffs just because I made a lot of wafers this week or pick a lot of photographs. So you have to do something that's continuous. It's like playing piano. You have to practice every day, get a little better. I learned my favorite song, and now I got to learn this new song that's even harder. And I'm in a band because, we all have to work together here and we're a team. And you combine that with something like James Clear's Atomic Habits, where he talks about doing small, achievable things a little bit at a time. I don't want 1,000 Instagram followers. I want to get 10 more every month.
Yeah,
Very
that's
doable.
the.
But I always want to do 10 more every month. And so, you can't get 10 Instagram followers in a month. You're not even trying. So you just do that. And bad habits will pay you today and cost you tomorrow. Good habits will cost you today and pay back tomorrow. And so develop these systems that make you succeed. If you get 10 Instagram followers a month, that's 120 a year. He would be over 2,000 this time next year.
Yeah.
And then he may raise that goal and say, okay, next year I'm going to get 15 of them. Right?
Yeah. And then the other thing is the strategy changes as you grow, right? So what happens after you get the 1,000, you add them, and you're more picky about who you add. Right. For example, one of the things that happens is like, for me, I don't add, if they are foreign language that I don't speak, it doesn't help, it kind of doesn't help me. Right. So I won't always I won't follow them, expecting them to follow back. But if I only had 100 followers, I might, because I beggars can't be choosers. Right. So as you grow, what happens is the organics will kick in, that momentum will build, and then you'll get more, as you were saying, you get more follows naturally, but then you also will get, you refine your technique, right? So the 10 won't take you as long, and you'll be getting better Instagram followers because you're more likely to get ones that will follow you back.
I was just wondering how many people have set goals for their photography for this year.
You mean 2025 or 2026?
2026, going forward.
I'm still working on mine because it's fourth quarter. So I have to wait and see how my fourth quarter is, but I'm starting to, I've just mentioned mine for 2026. Right, so, but I don't do my goals, I do my goals monthly. Right, so I try to do the yearly goal and then break it down into like each quarter, you know.
I was just hoping to get everybody here to speak up and say, what do they want to accomplish in photography in the next
Next year.
6 months, year?
Let's do that in January.
Well, I
We
mean,
can redo this in January. We're kind of talking about it now, Clay.
Okay.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. I want to submit more images to the image narrative review for PPA. I have had my arm twisted repeatedly to compete there. So I'm going to try to get 8 merits, which is the maximum you can get in a year.
well, you might want to break your goal down into monthly or, so that
It's
you
2
know.
images a month, at least.
Yeah, so that's another thing to think about. That's why I like, if you look at, I think I can go backwards. I do that's why I said, a month. This is a monthly goal sheet, but some people might only want to do them yearly if they're not that, if they're just beginning or they're not, maybe interested in selling. Did you have a question?
No, Dennis?
Dennis, did you have well, we shouldn't pressure folks
What are my
to,
goals for this year?
Did real well, but
I did very well in the competition. I was pleased with it, and it was interesting to listen to the judges, especially when they had a disagreement on one, where one judge was way off compared to the others, and then they talked about it. And that was real interesting to listen and talk about. I'm afraid, I lack a lot of communication with the outside world. I have my whole lot of really nice pictures, I think,
Mhm.
but that's one of the things I need to expand for next year.
yeah. So think about ways you can get your work like out more, So we shouldn't force anybody to share. If you want to share, go ahead, but you know,
All right, so I have a day job and I don't try to sell photos. If it happens, I'm okay with it. So it's kind of like a tiara syndrome, only
Mhm.
I'm not worried about it. And that gives me,
well, make sure though you get business cards and you get your mailing list, right? Because that's something that you want to grow, that mailing, because that will grow over time.
so maybe I'll have to make a mailing list. this year.
Yeah, that should, I'm really serious about that because if you get a mailing list, you don't even have to use, you don't have to use MailChimp if you don't want to use Substack or something that you can, because mailing list is cumulative, right? And if you ever decide you want to sell your photographs or you want to do more with your photography, having that mailing list is, because most of my sales come off my mailing list. Right. So it is the best way to, and it's harder to grow a mailing list if you don't have one. If you start from zero, it's really hard, but you could be working for 10 years and growing your mailing list. And like you were saying, if you do 10 a month over time, it's going to really add up. And so you may decide 10 or 15 years from now, hey, you want to just sell photos, you're going to have that huge mailing list. You'll be able to say, oh yeah, I'm set. So definitely business cards and mailing list are, the biggies. And it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that time consuming to set up a mailing. Even if you don't send email out, like even if you send one a month or one a quarter, it doesn't matter. Just try to grow that list. You try to at least get it set up. So yes, question, comment.
So as membership coordinator, my goal for you is to take the 5 business cards that I'm giving you, which Ed printed some new ones. They're really nice. And we'd like you to think about asking people to join the club. If you have them in your wallet, keep them in your pocket. And as you go to the holiday parties and things that you do this next couple of weeks, just kind of bring up the photography as something that you do. And then if they seem at all interested, just hand them one of these business cards and say, hey, I'm coming. We have a meeting every second
First and
Thursday.
third, yeah.
First is the-
First and third Thursdays.
First and third Thursday. Yeah, and then come to a program meeting.
Yeah.
So take these cards, that's a goal, give them all out and get some more next time.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, If anybody thinks of any questions, you know how to reach me.
And I am.
Are we late? Are we early? We have time. We're perfect. Oh, that's awesome. Perfect timing. Okay.
Don't forget.
I think I'm done. Yeah, we're done. Anybody online? Um,
Clay's gonna be
I just brought up my phone and said this.
So did we answer your question about how to work out more and?
So you can take a picture of the card.
Huh?
You can take a picture of the card from your phone and just
A little bit.
give it to people.
So
Yeah,
the
then I have to
thing
search
for you,
library.
I can take my mic too.
Keyword.
They bring it back just.
So the thing for you is once you have that Instagram following, right? Then what you want to do is you want to go think about what Magnus said about the guerrilla marketing, right? So think about ways you can co-brand and you can do guerrilla marketing, right? So think about your images and think about, and I like to do a data-driven approach, right? So what I do is I say, like, there's things I do. I look at, like, people are more likely to buy a photo when after 6 months after they move into a house or into a new place. And then couples are more likely to buy a photo than single people, right? So look for where couples go, where couples shop, and, generally speaking, art buyers are over 35 iPhone users who are couples who 6 months ago moved into a new place. That's the starting point. And then your data will fluctuate after that. Right. So one of the things I do when I do my marketing, my data-driven side, is I look at the places where they're underwriting the most mortgages. Rocket Mortgage publishes the places where there's cities that are outlying, meaning that people are moving away, versus cities where people are moving in and writing the most number of mortgages. And I take that and I use those geographies, and then I try to narrow down, like, for my photos, right? Like I have a surreal series. It's very colorful, right? So how would those images fit in, or another example is I do a lot of architectural photographs, right? Well, architecture, it does well in cities and urban environments, right? So look at the cities and figure out ways, a lot of my work sells in condos, right? So that's another thing. So when you start getting data points, you can start to see, like, okay, so my work sells well in condos. So maybe I need to look for, to me, the typical buyer is somebody who lives in a condo in Seattle. Right. I'm serious. They like my work because I do a lot of reflections, a lot of brightly colored, and that they like that. Right. And they have the wall space. If you think about a condo, when you walk into a condo, usually they have a good view. They have like a wall of glass, but then there's 3 walls where they put like artwork. And so that's one of the reasons they like my work. Right. But it can be based on the size and the state of your work, the way, what you do.
Okay, so once you've identified these locations, how are you actually getting your work out to them?
So that's where you have to use the guerrilla marketing, right? You have to think about ways you can approach them. You can look at galleries in those locations, but you might want to look at boutiques, right? So you might look at a boutique and figure out, like, is there a way I can, and it might not even be a photo, right? Like, I'm wearing a t-shirt that's mine, right? So you sell a t-shirt, you sell a tote bag to them. But what you do is you use, again, your goal is to get your foot in the door and then grow that mailing list. Right. So that's the idea, is you want to if you get into a boutique and you sell like puzzles or t-shirts or whatever, then you can actually look at growing that mailing list. Another way you can approach it is you can try to find interior designers or people that work in that,
You back up a step.
Mhm.
You mentioned a city that's completely
Mhm.
opposite of where we are here.
Yeah.
And you say that people in condos in or around that city are buying your work.
Mhm.
And you say, okay, I got my stuff into boutiques. So you're contacting stores in another city. And how are you just sending them, here's my social media feeds and my website to get your work in their store?
Well, for Seattle, what I've done is I try to do a mix. I do gallery shows there as well whenever I can. So, like, for example, I do Chase the Light, right, which is a big gallery show, right? So, and that's every year in June at PCN Pacific Photo Center Northwest. I always get the name wrong. It's the photo place in Seattle, right? So they do a charity, like a fundraiser. And basically what you do is you shoot the work over one weekend and you send the work in, and then they curate it and put it up on the wall. And it's been very successful for me because I've had people contact me and try to buy my work again. So I know that my work does very well and resonates in Seattle. So whenever I get an opportunity to present my work in Seattle, I always jump on it. So that's one thing, right? So there are galleries in Seattle that you can approach, but one of the problems with galleries is, again, it's the gatekeeper, right? They're going to decide what you like. Chase the Light, you get one photo in it, right? So the thing you can do is you can try to approach boutiques, you can try to approach smaller galleries, you can try to approach stores, you can try to co-brand. There's lots of things you can do. Like, so for me, one of the things that happened was like I had a restaurant buy one of my pieces, right? So then that's another way you can approach them and say, hey, would you promote me on Instagram? Would you do a giveaway with me? There's lots of ideas you can do, right? So it's really up to you to approach them and say,
But you're physically going.
I'm not, I'm emailing and
Emailing.
yeah, so that's, yeah. Now, if it's in Austin, I might physically go there. Right. One of the things I'm going to do in January is I'm going to look at more outreach to interior designers. Right. So the way you approach interior designers is I'm thinking about doing like a blurb book, but a small one, like a paperback. And there's a friend of mine in Idaho did this. He lives in Idaho. He lives outside of Boise, and he got like 5 or 6 other photographers, and they all chipped in and they made like one book with all their work in it. That's just like it's not a book like you would publish, but it's like a catalog. And has all about each artist, and they each have a few pages, and they have, 3 images per page. So it's not you don't see a big image. It's not like a photo book like I have, but it's more like a catalog. And then what he does is it's a collective. They formed a small artist collective. And then what they do is they go to the interior designers, they meet with them, they give them a copy of the book, they give them business cards, they say, hey, we're in the area, this is the type of work we do, you can order, here's how you order, and you cover the logistics. And so that's something I'm going to try to do in the new year as well, because the other thing about interior designers is right now, it's holiday time. People don't want to decorate their home, right? But January, they start with new projects and things, right? So that's when you want to reach out to them. But that's something I may be doing myself in the new year, is working more with designers. And so more outreach. So I set up on my website, I set up a page to the trade, right? That's focused on folks in the trade to buy my work. And then I'm going to approach designers more, even Austin area designers, and say, here's my work, whatever. But one of the things Magnus talked about was that the regional art right now is very successful. And so anything that's regional, so Texans are buying Texas art right now. It's more popular than, anything else. So that's another thing to think about, is it's a good time to sort of stay local, but that's not going to be the case forever, right? That trends can change. It's hard to predict. Next year, regional art may not be popular, right? It's hard to know what's going to happen next year. But that's some of the ways you can do it. And, I mentioned the Cuba work. I may go to, the cigar places, coffee shops, car washes, and all those places. And so for me, it really boils down to like, I don't have enough hours in the day to do all the stuff I want to do, right? So I still do gallery shows. I'm doing a new body of work that's not sales and marketing oriented. It's more like fine art. It's more like museum type work. And that I'm going to be shopping around in fact, that was published in Art Doc. So now, I've got that kind of in the works. So, but yeah. So any other questions? Okay, we're good. Thanks, folks.